6:36. I, Vice Chair, am leading this meeting, so I'll call this meeting to order. First agenda item, public comment. Over to you, Pam.
Hi, Next Gen. My name is Pam Shepard. I have a walk and a half from here, and good to see the new board getting together and working. So I wanted to talk about local governance and jobs on boards and commissions are advisory to city council. And I think your value is helping city council understand policy, what would be good policy choices for the future. You need to understand what the powers of local government are, and those are things like land use code. And city council should have been working on land use code in the past year. Comprehensive plan and transportation master plan should have been updated this year. So we should have been working on it from last year. Are we? No. Our staff is doing several other side things and not doing their primary job, which is to update the comp plan and the transportation master plan. And I have to say, those are issues that vitally must be of value to the next generation. Building the infrastructure and housing, you can't fix it for 80 years. If we make it wrong now, you guys will not be able to change it without urban renewal or terribly expensive things. So there is harm happening now, in my opinion, because the city is not engaging in the studies that should be now. So Next Gen, you're the folks who would pay the price over this next many decades of poor building and poor choices made now. My specific example is going to be Littleton Boulevard. So the staff is, I think, motivated by other reasons to do a sub-area plan. Instead, we should be looking at historic preservation of the mid-century modern on the north side of Littleton as an economic booster that only gains in value over the decades. It doesn't prohibit development. And my vision is Littleton Boulevard preserved in the 50s style of transportation, cars, and then powers, which Transportation Mobility Board has agreed with, to have pedestrian bikes on powers. And then think of the economic power of the side streets. So you've got the attraction with buses, maybe a circulator bus on Littleton Boulevard to downtown and light rail. You've got the side streets going over the pedestrian bike powers. And this is a very powerful vision, which the city hasn't examined at all, which I think would be a huge benefit. When you do this kind of thing, there's a professional process to evaluate it. The city is not engaged in any of that. And instead it's doing other things than engaging in these primary plans. So again, you folks would pay the price. Also, if we don't have the housing we need, we're not building, the city's ULUC that was passed is building gentrification. It is out of reach for 40% of people. It's definitely out of reach for young people because they don't have the income of, mid-career. So we're not building the right kinds of housing under the new land use code. Next Gen, if I were you, I would be passionate about these things, and I'd be saying what we want you to do, council, in your policy is look at the basics here. Are you supplying the housing? Tell us how much housing you're building that's affordable to us. They aren't building any that's affordable to you guys. But ask them for that. Ask them for the data. Everything should be data-driven and based on evidence. And there's a process to then use that evidence to make the best decisions as a group. And we haven't been doing that. So that's my urging to you is I think the council's on the wrong track, so is staff. You guys are gonna pay the price. We can do much better. Littleton has better bones. We inherited great bones, and so we can do better than what's being done now. Thanks.
All right, that's a perfect segue into tonight's discussion topics. So the high level goal for tonight is essentially strategic priority goal setting. What do we want to take on for the remainder of the year? trying to find some solid consensus on that. And yeah, I think the few things that Ricky and I went back and forth on kind of about how to go about this as a process is, you know, wanting to set a few high priority initiatives for the year, things that we can actually like achieve, accomplish, and have actionable outputs from. So keeping that in mind with kind of as we're dialoguing about perspectives or priorities. As well as trying to find things that really line up with the scope of next gen board, so the things that do impact us. And at the same time, not shying away from topics just because city councils already discussed them, other boards or commissions already talk about them, dialogue's already happening, like we can serve as a positive, like supplemental, complementary, potentially critical voice of those things. That's my high level primer before going to that. The goal being we can at least come up with a few. I know we don't have everybody here, so maybe not trying to map out in perfect detail the entire year. Coming up with a few high level priorities and especially coming up with a concrete one to work on over the next few months, kind of the first quarter of the year. While also then solidifying kind of action items or deliverables we want output from that. How does that sound to everyone?
Sounds good.
Right. Does anyone have any ideas what they would like to see prioritized?
Here, go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. I think the initial proposals for Geneva Village could be something that we could basically put together a proposal for, or an amendment to a proposal or commentary on a proposal, given the stage the project is in and how much it's going to affect Littleton in the coming years, and just where we are in the timeline for that. I think putting together a proposal for that would be actionable, easy to achieve in a year. And although we probably wouldn't be seeing many results from that based on where that project is in the year, I think we'd see at least some feedback and, you know, some work on that.
That's a good one. How do we want to go about this? Do we want to go get a few ideas out there, filter it down, find our top priority?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Feels like the natural way. Okay. Yeah, I like that idea. I think that the timelines on that are helpful. Early, I think timelines again, something that just like can limit what we actually like have impact on. Stuff's already out the door. Takes a few meetings for us to get stuff under our belt. That's not potentially that realistic. So yeah, that's a good call out. And I do know that's a big asset in project. What else we got? What's on top of people's minds?
I've had some shared thoughts with Pam actually over since our last meeting, where just looking at the Denver Metro as a bigger thing and watching all this new development come through. Like I've noticed it especially since like 2012, and it's all these things that are going up super, super quick and they're brand new and expensive to build. And then once they are built, it's built by developers that they're not building them to not make a profit. So it's really, you know, like, yes, there's it, as a realtor, I can tell you there isn't increase in inventory, but prices have stayed at the average price in Metro Denver right now is $895. At its peak, it was 900,000 in 2022. So that was like the peak average price in Denver. We're at $895 now with the increase in inventory. So all this new development isn't necessarily like really making a huge impact on affordability. And so something I've thought about is instead of building new, which often talking to inspectors and stuff, it's not better. It's like kind of lipstick on a pig situation, is really like looking at the infrastructure we have and the stuff that was built, you know, in the 50s and 70s, that's true, like has true Colorado architectural integrity, and updating it, you know, like giving grants to companies, businesses, where the businesses can put money into the structure and they are incentivized to do so. Same with homeowners, like replacing windows right now, it's something like on average, it's like 30 grand to replace 5 windows. So like and that like, that's good for the environment too, like making energy efficient changes. But instead of building new, incentivizing new homeowners to buy the kind of beat up bad house, knowing that they can have these grants, have these opportunities to fix it up where it's, the bones are built well, it just needs to be brought into like the modern era with the kitchen, the bathrooms, the windows, whatever. And I think that can translate from businesses to residential properties as well. And I think we're missing that whole side of development. And we're developing new instead of like improving what we already have.
Well, we're kind of missing out on the middleman. I think we're having the government make assumptions about what people are looking for to a certain extent. And there's all these businesses that are on people that are already invested in Littleton. And I feel like kind of along Kaki's lines, investing back in those people and therefore the city might create a more long-term solution. Also, something in real estate that we're seeing is, you know, everyone's very worried about inventory and home prices, but we are seeing a lot of people leaving Colorado and a generation moving out of their homes and into senior care living or passing on. So
Yeah.
we're seeing for the first time since I believe 2008, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. I'm trying to recall all my data, but home inventory is increasing and home sales are going down. So it's not as doom and gloom, like there is an affordability issue, but it's not just because of real estate. I think, you know, we're building a lot of apartments, but what we're seeing, people move to Littleton often not for an apartment, but for a single family house. So also paying attention to like what type of affordable living we're creating. Is it what people really want? And is that why they're moving to this area? And just keeping up with the integrity of Littleton and why people were initially drawn here and making sure we're sticking to that character.
And being like thinking a generation on, you don't want to build a ghost town. Like us as millennials, we're not having as many kids as the boomers had. Boomers are aging out, they're passing on. Like we're not, as millennials, we're not gonna fill that space because we're not having as many kids statistically. And so you don't wanna create so much inventory where it's a ghost town that, you know, in 50 years, no one wants to come to. So I said this before we had a whole new committee. I think our actions have been very reactionary instead of thinking of long-term solutions. So sorry, piggybacking off of you again, but.
So I guess housing.
Just about to ask for the shoe.
I was like, we're gonna be beating a dead horse here.
Michael, good to join us. I'm Bobby.
Nice to meet you.
Vice chairing today.
Yes, sorry for my tardiness. I thought 6:45.
Okay. We were just diving into kind of the topic of this meeting, priority setting, with trying to come up with key priorities for the year, especially for the next few months, so we can start hitting something concrete right away, with a focus on like concrete action items. For example, Geneva Village, adding in our own mini version of proposal, how to navigate that stuff, partnering, whatever it might be. So piggybacking on that discussion, I think housing, both because it's a city, it's a huge city, power, zoning, all of those things. It is a huge focus. It is a huge focus for our generation and prospective residents. I hope it's not too hard of a sell to get everybody to care about like housing, but the question is like, what do we want to do with that here? What do we want thinking about like, what would we want to do if we have 2 to 3 more meetings with the primary emphasis being on housing? What do we want to come out of that? Is that just a general policy letter expressing next gen positions? Is it specific ULUC recommendations to keep in mind for the future? Is it transportation mobility things? Like,
For me,
Not really
it's
housing, but
kind of, it ties into Geneva Village, it ties into the big downtown Littleton project, it ties into really just the integrity of like the character of Littleton and how we're developing Littleton in general. Is it a bunch of apartment complexes? Is it? Who are we gearing towards? I guess would be. I know that's a little more big picture than what you were asking for, but I think it does touch on all of those areas, and I think that they all are meant to coincide.
I don't disagree. I also am intimidated as a vice chair on the board to say like, let's do that. Oh, I also have a full-time job and don't necessarily want to become an expert on all of urban development. So I'm thinking like, because I do agree with you, like that stuff matters. I'm sure city council agrees with you. I'm sure most residents are like, where do we want to plug into that? I'm thinking like some of the Horizon 2027, like strategic initiatives, like multiple of those initiatives could kind of touch on those general things, like the downtown Littleton project, a lot of our emphasis on, shopping local and increasing like marketing efforts around that, stuff around just marketing Littleton as a general city, both for business and for like branding. Stuff around, there's 30 of them, they're kind of hard to keep track of. Yeah, just like income housing development, like that type of stuff. Like there are potentially 5-6 initiatives that all kind of funnel up to that. Do we want to just make all of those our priorities and try to touch on all of them? How do we want to piece into those? I think we could, I would love to grab coffee with everyone and sit and just like chat about these things because they're philosophically interesting, but with the goal of actually like having something at the end of a few meetings to give to council, to have on record, to try to push something. Where do we want to take that?
Sorry, we're talking a lot, so please, if anyone else has something to say, please jump in.
I'm just gonna like bounce off what you guys said.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're good.
I was just gonna, I think like a good focus point could be, looking into, cause I just don't, I'm a realtor, like I don't know how government works outside of this group, but like, looking into like what it would look like to give Littleton business owners grants, to make their businesses better, to improve the spaces, and then bigger picture, I do the same thing for like first time homeowner grants. Like if you're a first time buyer and you have choices between Lakewood, Littleton, Denver, Inglewood, and your price range is like, let's say reasonably like 600,000. And the only reason like you're choosing Littleton is because house is same, it's a 3-2, whatever. But Littleton is giving you a grant where you can replace all the windows or, some sort of improvement where you can put it towards the yard, whatever. Like something like that where it's gonna make Littleton more valuable and a more pretty community to drive around. Everyone, like all the things. And it's just, yeah, more energy efficient. So I would like focus on the city helping business owners and homeowners make their spaces better.
So as you guys think about the kind of putting stuff together, I think one of the questions is kind of what do you want staff to come talk to you about? And so we have a grant program for businesses. And so the Economic Development Department could come talk about our incentives policy for businesses and kind of what we do. And we also have a housing policy analyst who could come and talk to you about kind of what are the policy options that we are currently using and could use to impact housing. And so, yeah, I would just encourage you to think about, well, what do you want to, I think you're on the right track of what do you want to give us advice about, but the next question is kind of, what do we want to ask staff to come talk to you about?
That's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's something I thought about. I forgot to write down. So my little preamble is like, I don't expect any of us, and I hope not a lot of other people do, to like necessarily be experts on these things ahead of time already. I think we might have opinions and stuff, but especially to that point, how would these things actually even be implemented? How could we actually impact them? Like, we don't have to know that right now for that to still be a priority. It can be a priority area, and then we have the presentations later. We leave this meeting, come back in June, having done some research, looked into the relevant areas of certain codes, what's happening in Littleton, et cetera. So I think to that point, like, on one hand, let's try to balance, like, don't shy away from stuff just because we're like, oh, I don't really know how it would work. We can troubleshoot that. But at the same time, not necessarily getting so attached. Like, I like the idea of like looking into the grant opportunities. I think from my perspective, that feels like, at least at this point, almost like too narrow of a scope, where it's like, let's find the happy middle ground around like, yeah, economic development and revitalization of like existing assets. Like that probably would be like we could put together a number of policy recommendations in that space, of which how we want to adjust grants and stuff could be like a good.
Write that down.
So yeah, I think there's like right, same point. I think, yes, the idea of, I think Geneva Village as let's look into that and put together some recommendations is a great scope. If, hey, we want Geneva Village to be this 5-story max, design this exact way, whatever, it's like, that can be the output. That could be the output we get to. It's like, yeah, we really think we need to be pouring more effort into these grants or revitalization. But for the purposes of like priority setting, we don't need to probably anchor quite to that level.
I have a thought.
Yeah.
What if everyone goes around and says their favorite thing about living in Littleton and what they think Littleton is most lacking? Because I feel like to a certain extent that there might be some overlap where it might lead our focus.
I'm not opposed to that. I think that's a good idea.
Oh, sure.
Do a little.
So I think that one thing that I love about living in Littleton, I think I mentioned last time, like I work in downtown Denver, still live here. I think it's just like the community feel. One thing that really stood out for me last time was like my neighborhood, Littleton Village, like how it came to be. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think one thing that I enjoy is there's like parks, there's like I play hockey, like there's anywhere I can go, like South Suburban, like I can go to a park, I can go on a hike or whatever, or a trail. And it's just not like a concrete maze, it's an actual place that has like greenery and things like that. And I think, I don't know, just being able to like walk outside and see grass versus seeing concrete just makes me feel better. On the flip side of that, I also see that like my neighborhood is kind of like this weird pocket of like apartments and modern, and they're building more, and I'm like, wait, there's like no character in my little like neighborhood. And that's actually where I wrote down is like kind of keeping that preservation, and then thinking about Littleton as like that small town having like that bigger medium-sized vibe, but getting away from maybe like a very like cookie cutter, like, great, you see this building and it's probably like the exact same style as like every other apartment complex in the Denver metro area, versus like an actual like piece of character that makes you think like, okay, this is like an actual like small town that I'm a part of, I'm a part of the community. So. I think my favorite thing has been a concentration of third places that is not like actually zero. That's pretty great. Like, well, Devil's Cup, Mango Tree now, Enchanted Grounds, Down Bowls, it's great, stuff like that, I think is my favorite.
Anything you feel like is particularly lacking, jumps out?
I'm waiting very patiently for Snarf Stove.
It's totally bad for my.
I was like, man, we need a sandwich shop, and they're like, we got you. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, my wife and I just moved back to Colorado about a year ago, and we moved here to Littleton very intentionally. We were coming from Florida. We made 2 trips out here before we kind of zeroed in on, this is the little pocket of Denver that we want to be in. And I think it's a mixture of things. It's a mixture of community. And even from outside, like an outsider perspective, we sensed that. But I think that there's also like some really sweet geographic benefits that Littleton has to offer as well. And that's just built in. We're super fortunate. We have South Platte River coming through here. We've got the trail systems between the High Line and the South Platte and Mary Carter trails. And then there's a pretty mix of income and types of people. So we live in a rental condo right now over in the Steeplechase buildings near River Point Retirement Tower. And so it's pretty sweet to see all walks of life over on that side of the river, and then come over here and see, you know, smaller houses, apartments, and then great boys. But then I think maybe this is just like silly, but I think the roads are really wide. So we came from Florida and they've got wide roads down there, but they are so wide here. People fly on them, and I've seen studies on how narrower roads versus wider roads, and I know that Littleton's been working on some of that with. But yeah, I think that we got some really wide roads.
Do you go by Mike or Michael?
Cool.
Michael, so, I apologize for commenting, but that's what I do. So I would caution you to think about many of the amenities that you value, like the trails and the Mary Carter Trail and the infrastructure around the Platte River, are because people working for the city or citizens kind of pushed those initiatives 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so part of the challenge is, what is the next generation of kind of community things that we want to make? And that's why we're here, is to do that. And then I would encourage you to continue this conversation around road safety. I mean, I think that's something the city's definitely going to engage in. We will be revisiting the transportation mobility plan next year, and that'll be a big conversation I hope you guys all participate in. So, or transportation master plan, sorry.
Does the current plan end in 2025?
The current plan, I think, I was supposed to, as Pam said, the original plan was for it to be revisited this year. Staff asked us to not revisit it this year because they had too many projects on their plate that they're working on. And so the plan is for it to be revisited next year. But in the meantime, you know, over the past, since I've been on council, so one of the bits, one of the bits of history is that there was a car accident 2 years ago. Stewart was killed on his way to school. And that kind of energized the kind of community around bike and pet safety. So as a result of that, the city kind of pushed a Safer Streets initiative and reallocated about $3 million within the city towards a lot of many temporary projects. A lot of the things you see with, you know, flags and things to slow the traffic are temporary projects to see if they work. And some of them haven't worked, which has been really interesting. And so, and actually Liam's father is now on the Transportation Mobility Board. I really won't, I probably will lecture more, but
It's helpful.
No, that was really helpful
To have the perspective.
thank you for that positive feedback.
Yeah, I think my favorite things about Littleton, echoing a lot of the sentiment, is the balance of feel. It's nice to feed off of Denver and Colorado energy more, like in a large sense, but also have like a sense of peace and calm in the really awesome pocket that is Littleton and all the resources we have right out the back door. I think some of the things I dislike, I went to school in Boulder, just feel like I biked everywhere up there. And so same type of thing, like here, it's like I bike but half the time I'm like praying for my safety on the bike. And so I imagine people who aren't as comfortable biking just don't, and like, that's a bummer. And I also think there is like this is probably true of a lot of Colorado and just places in general. There's just a hard sense of like how to move forward, how to continue developing, how to balance all the differing needs of like wanting to improve things, wanting to improve access, wanting to like allow people to live here while balancing all of the aspects of like character. Like, I don't want to see this place fully change and lose a lot of the resources, but at the same time, there's like a representation issue in terms of a lot of the feedback city council gets, and that being from older generations. That's why I like being on this board. There's a representation issue in terms of I have a lot of friends who would like to live here that just can't, and now have like moved up to Fort Collins and stuff. So I think feeling it become a competitive and like, at least in my experience, a pretty like inaccessible community for a lot of people is problematic in my eyes.
Are you going, Chris? Is it going to me? Are you going?
Am I going? I don't live in Littleton.
Oh.
Surprise, surprise.
His words hold no weight.
I agree.
I think echoing a lot, I love the trail systems in Littleton and the open space. I love how when our downtown Littleton like feels like you're in Gilmore Girls, like it's so cute and historic. And like as a realtor going to like Parker or Highlands Ranch and like Central Park and how like their downtowns, it's basically like a culmination of strip malls and like big box stores, and totally has its value, but I really value like the architecture and the historical integrity of our downtown Main Street area. My biggest like fear, more than like what I don't like now, is watching just Littleton be reactive to issues instead of have long-term solutions. And so I fear that we're gonna turn into like Parker, where it's a bunch of tract homes, which I think would be a huge bummer. And I fear that, yeah, like tract homes and strip malls is something I would love to avoid in Littleton.
Yeah, I like having bigger lots, a little more space, more green space and trails. I think that combo, especially with having a small downtown, is really unique and special. Day to day, what I think Littleton is lacking the most, and part of this might be from growing up here and it just being like a frustration of the community I grew up in over and over again, is lack of diversity of businesses. We have 5 coffee shops, 5 burger shops, 5 Mexican food places, and that's it. You know, it's kind of repetitive.
Snarfs is coming.
So I think from a daily point of view, that's where I find the most what's lacking. But my biggest fear is that in our effort to make, I think it's important to realize Littleton getting as expensive and at becoming this niche place that people want to get into, where it is more competitive and hard to get in, it happened because it's so cool. And I am scared that in our effort to make it somewhere that everyone can get into, we become Highlands Ranch. You know, like there is something good about it becoming this competitive, tough place to get into. And it's unfortunate that it's all comes down to affordability, but like we have to balance the two, I guess, at the end of the day is what I'm saying. And we won't have that problem of people wanting to get in if in our effort to make it somewhere that everyone can get into, we destroy what it is and why they want to be there. So I think that's the balance we have to find.
Well, and to highlight Pam's point, a lot of these changes aren't gonna be things that necessarily cause everything to crumble overnight. If they do have bad impacts, that might be many years down the road. So do you think they're important? So the general theme I'm hearing from that exercise, that was a great recommendation, by the way, good call.
Well, I've honestly just been curious.
Is a sense of like preserving character of Littleton. A sense of doing that like a sustainable way, that both being from a residential, a commercial, and an environmental perspective. Trying to develop as much as possible without essentially pushing too far past that limit and taking away all the things that are kind of what drove us to move here and love living here, so. Love that, because I think that from, you know, the stuff I've done, pushing through, digging through all the like council documents and stuff that's happening, that's very aligned with like city council's goals at a high level. Obviously, I think as everyone finds, like there's disagreement in how to exactly like move about those things. Yeah, I think those are like, again, good guiding visions. But I don't know what to do with them.
What if we look at the timeline? What's coming first that matches, that plays into those things? And where the most amount of money is being spent?
Yeah.
And then we can prioritize by timing, money, and then maybe we'll be able to cross out more things than we think as
Yeah.
these things come up for city council.
Do you want Chris to pull up the tentative council agenda for future meetings?
Yeah, that'd be
Want me
awesome.
to,
I suppose.
want me to send it to you?
Not a bad idea.
You send that to me, I can put it up there.
So, what I'm gonna send to you is the council agenda for the next meeting, and one of the meeting documents is the tentative agenda, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's the second, right? You
Today.
are the second.
Oh, I am, yes, that is me.
And then that is a, not saying. Well, I guess there's more than one Chris Nelson.
With my name, yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's probably a good guess.
You like Robert or Rob? Robert. It's my middle name. Does the city of Littleton track demographics of its citizens, or is that something that we leave to the state or the county?
Well, we know, I mean, the data for the demographics would come from the state demographer. Actually, when Bobby was talking about kind of learning about what we are, I pulled down, this may sound silly, but about a year ago, we got a retail market report on what our retail market is like in the city. And that has been the best kind of demographic information I've gotten on the city, and I can send that to Chris too, if you guys want to look at it. So I understand you're not asking about retail, but it just happens to be where I've gotten kind of the most concise demographic information. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think what I hear is a lot of questions about demographics. You know, we're on the younger side of generations. There are people in Littleton who are not in our generation. And so how do we see what trends are taking place? Like who actually lives here? Who is moving in? Who's moving out? How do we?
The first figure, city of Littleton has an older population compared to Denver Metro. 29% of Littleton's residents are above the age of 60. I'll send that off.
Yeah, I was at a meeting maybe a month ago, and there was a professor from CU who was talking about demographics of the state of Colorado, and the fastest growing populace is those age 65 and above. So every other demographic is like either shrinking or holding steady. The 65 and above is growing, so.
Wow. And that's mostly because of people aging, for the people that is moving in. People moved here in the 70s and 80s that are now 90s and. But anyways, I'll send this to you. Or send it to Chris.
Oh, Dennis is in here.
Huh?
How's it going, Dennis? I didn't know you were here.
I can tell you about 25% of the houses we've bought or sold this past year are estate sales.
Yeah, I have a handful of friends who are
Chunk.
dealing with aging parents and moving out.
Which I think that's gonna be. It's a huge issue that people aren't talking about because we're like millennials and things, and yet like aren't having kids to fill a space, and that's gonna be an issue at some point if we keep having all these new houses.
Oh, nice, we got it.
What do you want to take a look at first?
Well, I, believe it or not, have not memorized this. So, I mean, I feel like Mackenzie was like, well, let's see what comes up first on the agenda, so we can kind of see, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you guys don't care about that come up, but you could scroll through it and, this next meeting, I think the most interesting thing is actually near the bottom. We're gonna vote on whether we're gonna do a moratorium on developing more gas stations.
You remember the date generally?
No, but so I think just go one by one. So, meeting by meeting. So the way it works is, in general, is more detail the closer the meeting is. And so this is the agenda for the meeting that's next week. And so there's a lot of detail. And you see a lot of the stuff in here is not any of the topics you guys came up with. But there'll be, I think the next housing related issue will be ULUC. I think I talked about last time. But just keep going down and we can kind of slowly go down the basket roll.
See anything.
How many gas?
I was like, I have a laptop somewhere.
That better?
No.
No.
I need
I think
glasses.
you did,
Email
like,
that? Can you
month by
email it
14.
to the group?
You just Google
Having like a
tentative city council.
Oh.
realization right now.
Oh. You gonna send that to them, Robert?
No, I don't have everybody's email.
All right, I got it.
Maybe I do.
If you just Google Littleton tentative city council, that should be the first result.
On the website.
Yeah, I think there's stuff on there. I think that's maybe a good. I know like ULUC stuff is in June. It's a little tricky because that's kind of before our next meeting then. Trying to think of how to align some of these goals with like some of the concrete things that are happening so that we don't just have to totally come up with like new stuff on our own, because again, that's probably gonna limit our capacity and can then pull from, city staff and council and what like they're working on. There are those like horizon initiatives and stuff as well that are guiding a lot of work and that could be a good area to try to like align some views to.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is analyzing the just city council schedule or opportunities to impact policy and bringing in like the housing analyst. It's a lot easier to go have something presented to you and then go, well, what if we did like this thing differently or this thing differently, or wow, did you think about X? I think that would make it a lot easier to come up with a concrete plan for like, oh, actually we needed like this thing. And then we could like official letter to the council or something like that.
Yeah.
I do think it's worth having those two people the two groups that Robert brought up, just so we have like an idea of what's feasible and what's not, because I have a lot of ideas that aren't feasible.
All right, so what I'm hearing so far, like, I think something related to housing policy, whether we look at that through the exact lens of ULUC, through grants, something like that, that housing policy and our high level recommendations around that is probably a generally interesting topic for everyone.
I would still like bucket out, like some of like the different points we talked about, because I think like as we kind of get those people coming in and talking to us, we can probably narrow it down and get more clarity.
Right.
Like, I guess I'm just like still like a little fearful of having like a very high level umbrella. Like, I think we have some good ideas. I think it's more a matter of like, how can we execute those versus like, do we have the right ones?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again, I think that's fine if that's within scope, especially with where we're at, just in terms of what we've researched right now, to say we want to put together something on housing policy. We don't really know exactly what that's gonna look like yet. But, and that can be our deliverable for July or August, or we can punt it down the road as that like process gets going. But So we don't have to commit to the exact thing that we're like, we are gonna send city council 5 recommendations on ULUC updates right now. Like, if we're not ready to make that level of a commitment to what we're prioritizing, that's fine, but I think saying we're gonna do a housing policy review and we're gonna put together kind of the next gen board's proposals for how that integrates with what the city's doing, like that seems well scoped. I mean, again, that could go in 1,000 different directions, but like, it also allows us the flexibility to like adjust that as we go on. Just before we get into picking priorities too much, the only other one I wanted to kind of advocate for is ULUC and general housing stuff is very online with my things. Transportation mobility more general, that's pretty in line with stuff I have. The 2 areas that we just haven't talked about at all that I thought of at a time is the city charter review is happening this year. I don't know if we all find that interesting or not. It's not the most fascinating document to look through, but like, it is the city charter and it is being reviewed this year and there's going to be a separate board like reviewing that. Potentially taking advantage of that is just like that doesn't happen all the time. That could be an interesting thing for us to like lend some perspective to. We don't have to review the whole charter, but if there are topics within it that end up being particularly relevant to us, weighing in on that could be something worth considering. And then outside of that, just doing a budget review, again, not trying to do that comprehensively, but really looking at like, does that align with from our perspective in terms of like next gen and long-term planning, does it align with strategic initiatives that we think are most important?
I love the budget review idea.
Down too.
This is amazing.
Cause I think that's kind of, it does touch on, it's just like where we wanna like where we should be prioritizing. All starts with the budget review.
All right.
Also, the project downtown, it's like a huge
And also a timely thing.
timeline.
What are some of the key deadlines happening around Project Downtown stuff?
So the,
Design, I know like planning.
well,
Research.
there's 2 kind of decisions we have to make. One is, the full project downtown plan was $160 million. The last time we really talked about it as a council, the amount of money we were thinking we wanted to spend was 35 million. And I think that still may be too much. It may be closer to 20. So we have to decide in the big picture, what of the things that have been proposed do we want to do? And then the decision that I think we've essentially made is how do we want to pay for it? And the council is leaning towards, but has not officially said, using general obligation bonds. And so that would require a vote, not this November is too soon, it would be next November. And then for that, part of that would be, well, what all would we put in the package? Would it just be downtown, or would there be other things that would be other investments in the city that we would want to include? But the discussion of what parts of the Littleton downtown project we want to do hasn't been teed up, and I don't think we're gonna really do that till this is not anything official. I don't think we're gonna do it till near the end of the year, into this calendar year, next year, as we're preparing to think about doing it.
I think we should make sure that we have that.
Keep that on the radar.
Yeah,
I think that one just strikes me as like a nice, like reasonably scoped thing for us to take on that does impact a lot of the stuff we've talked about here today. Like, it's not directly housing, I guess, related, but it's development, it's character, there's transportation aspects and stuff to it as well. So that could be a good one where we can bring a lot of like holistic views together. So yeah, that's right. I mean, we can tentatively say that's going to be a priority. Exactly what quarter, when we take it on, what that looks like, that's TBD based on how it moves forward in city council discussions and stuff.
is there someone we should have visit in advance?
About the,
to discuss? Like what their plan, like the initial, what are we gonna be seeing as options for?
Well, so we've kind of picked, so yeah, they had three options. I think you and I went to
Yeah.
the thing, and so we've kind of picked the layout option that we're thinking about.
Just narrowing that down.
Yeah, within that one, it's, are we gonna focus on planters? Are we gonna focus on, one of the parts of the conversation is having a curbless street, so it's more pedestrian friendly. Is that a high priority? Those kind of things. But yeah, you could absolutely ask for someone to come kind of talk to you about what is in the current plan. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that's good. Let's definitely keep that on the agenda. I'll try to keep track of how discussions are on that, but to the point, it's probably not a bad idea too. So maybe not the most urgent one since it's not a pressing deadline, but yeah, that's also a nice one because then it's well scoped. We don't have to figure out how to downtown or how to design everything. We could just take the plan as it is. And say,
I got some horrible ideas.
thinking prioritizations of existing things can usually be an easier, nicer scoped thing than like coming up with a list of everything we're gonna do on its own. So
Yeah, I'm sending you guys 3 documents in an email. That's we got a presentation on housing just last month, which is the current kind of what we're doing around housing in the city. And Julie is the housing analyst that you may want to ask to come talk to you, and then the retail market analysis, and then the tentative agenda. Of course.
all right,
This is all your city email.
lovely.
I don't know your other, I don't want
Is that still priority one or can we shift over?
Sorry, what's that?
Are we still discussing priority one or can we shift over?
I think we'll shift over to what?
I just had like another idea.
Yeah.
I just didn't wanna like.
No, go for it. I think that's.
Conversation.
I think Project Downtown is good. We probably don't need to discuss that more right now, but we
Okay.
can all.
I think the other thing that, and it might touch on different areas, is like kind of like downtown and kind of some of like the small businesses and kind of like the culture. And I know that I was reading, I think there was like a proclamation of like Small Business Week, and maybe there might be a way we can kind of like plug in and say like, how can we kind of create something more like for Littleton? I know there's probably some work being done around that, but I think one part of like Littleton's charm, especially the downtown area, is just like some of the local businesses or smaller businesses. Like, how can we just kind of like elevate and amplify that? And like to your point, like there's like the same 5 things of this, 5 things of this. Like there might be opportunities that kind of saying like, okay, hey, Littleton's a place where you really can kind of like grow and develop your business. Like this is like that little small hub. Like it might invite maybe in the future like some other businesses or some other areas.
Sorry. So Pam did mention the kind of the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. And that plan is supposed to integrate kind of economic development, zoning, historical preservation, all those things, and talk about what do we just, we have a relatively vibrant downtown, but I think there are opportunities on Littleton Boulevard to add to the vibe. I think that's part of the conversation that's going to be part of the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. So that may, with the conversation about what do we want the vibe to be, that might be something that you want to be. And it's essentially right now, we're just hiring consultants to come to it. That's at the stage we're at, is who's going to be the
You
consultant.
could pay us to consult on it.
Sounds like a conflict of interest.
So Mackenzie, I'm gonna tease you a little. And so I'm a consultant, and one of the hard parts about being a consultant is you don't actually get to give your own advice. You have to give the advice that everybody else gave you to give. And I think you would have more fun consulting with the consultant than being the consultant.
Couldn't be more encouraging.
That's why you're on this board. I think that's, yeah, that seems like another good one to be on top of. Nice that it's on like the early stages. Feel like we have I mean, not that we can't make more of these more concrete. But just making sure we don't run too long without actually having, next steps. I guess here's where I'm gonna stop myself first. general thoughts on like what's come up so far, general housing policy things, Project Downtown, Littleton Boulevard. Any high level thoughts at this point on kind of thinking of those types of things within our scope? What we would actually like the like impact of us to be. Not in like the like nice way of like, we make everything better and it's good, but like, you know, do we wanna target our efforts more towards supporting other groups and initiatives, to putting policy recommendations together, to like critiquing existing plans, all of the above, depending on the project? Any ideas there just in terms of like the deliverable actionables, things of that nature?
So from my experience last year, and Robert's talked about this a little, but when we do have those different groups come in and talk to us, I think being very active in that conversation and kind of critical and asking questions and the whys while those people are here is super important. And then it's easy to send an email to Robert, and we could do a group email or separate emails, but kind of poking holes or saying like addressing that conversation. And I don't necessarily think it needs to be like a huge group thing. So I think those are like almost like side projects that are easy to do as we see these groups. But for the overall vision of next gen, I think what I would like to see kind of goes back to that budget review is I'd like to influence where city council is investing. I'd like to be part of like, I think this needs to be a priority. And some of these things I don't think are serving the greater good for the longest amount of time. That's what I personally do.
Yeah.
So putting together concrete recommendations and like specific, hey, we should, even if it's right, that's a good example. I don't necessarily know how the budget gets drawn up every year, but it's like, to the extent possible, stop doing this thing, please start doing this thing. To the extent possible, don't pass that out ordinance, do this, like things of that nature.
Move more money here, less money, like if you have to choose between this project and this project, we see more value in this project.
I think I looked at the environmental stewardships like action plan and that type of stuff, and like it is nicely scoped out in that way, where like some of the things on there, at least I don't know how the conversations actually go. I haven't watched all their meetings, I don't have that much time. But like some of the things in there are like pretty lofty about like preserving tree canopy, and it's like that's not concrete. Like I don't know how you do that, but it's like you break it down, and other things in there are very like specific and actionable. So I don't think it's a bad thing if we are making recommendations that, again, it's like, it's not necessarily an easy recommendation, but it's like, hey, this is a firm belief of everyone on this board, or the consensus to land in those areas. Obviously, when we can tie it to specific ordinances, budget proposals, things that are happening, that is just nice.
You can, as the people come in, I think you totally can, like something we had, the project, well, it's not Project Zero anymore. But the Safer Streets people come in and they were talking about all the different trial programs they have out there. And a conversation that we all had was how much money is being spent on these trial programs that a lot of people aren't, like the translation of the trial to the concrete thing might not necessarily be there. And we're planning on putting more money into trial programs. And it's like, okay, at what point are we willing to do less trial, less temporary things and more, I'm sorry, I'm saying this
Like
poorly.
focus on one area really well.
They're touching everything right now with temporary issue or with temporary solutions. And so like something we discussed was, why is that money not going to more permanent solutions, even if it's hitting fewer areas? So things like that, I do think we'll see as these presenters come in and be able to make more specific recommendations than it might seem like now.
Yeah, absolutely that point. I think like, obviously, we are not there yet, but when we set the meeting agenda for next meeting, that I think is where we can action on all that.
Cool.
Yeah, cause I think like last year being on the board, it was a lot of like, this is nice, that sounds nice, this would be like, it was all very theoretical, and I think, like, I don't think anyone like, apart from some people individually, like really spoke to a member of the council to be like, that, cause we didn't have like a collective thought. And so I do think like really, like if it, like trying to have a collective thought at each meeting and individually like writing emails to Robert or different city council members to be like, this is something that like is on all of our minds, and this is something that we actually like getting our thoughts to council, I think is kind of the point of the board, and it's something that we haven't been doing. At least last year, we did not do that well.
I think when thinking about taking like a few priorities on, when you break down the years it looks in front of us, knowing that we already kind of, you know, these first few meetings aren't necessarily meant to be that productive, like if we take on 3 to 4 key priority areas, that's like 2 to 3 meetings per area. And so that's one to potentially just go, hey, we're all gonna do our research on our own, see what's going on. We're gonna get a presentation from the city staff. We're gonna come together, dialogue, and then we're gonna set the agenda in that one to say, now what are we gonna do with all this information coming into the next one? And then like, what are we actually gonna like produce in that? And then you produce it and kind of like 2 meetings. It's not necessarily that easy, but it's like, get all the information together, discuss consensus, put together what we think like the deliverable is. Next meeting goes into approve it, make some edits, whatever, and then start the next one. Like
Right.
that's,
2 prep meetings, 1 deliverable.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know, again, like with some like overlap in there, that deliverable meeting can probably be more or less extensive at certain times. So like that would give us the ability to work on 3 to 4 concrete things this year. And those don't necessarily have to like come together in any way, but like while we're doing that, that can also be an opportunity for us to like keep learning more things, percolate new ideas to the top, like pivot directions as like we see fit. So when I look at it that way, it's like that's kind of a good sense to think about like scoping out some of these things of like, yeah. Overhauling all of Littleton city policies, like, can't do that. We're not gonna learn all of that in a few months and be able to write stuff on it. Going through Project Downtown, having a discussion about what we think the priorities should be, and then putting together a 1-2 pager telling city council, like, this is what we think the priorities should be from next gen board going forward. Like we could do that. That'd be cool. That would be something that could come up. Robert could present that in a city council meeting. Like, yeah, that's exciting. So with that kind of vision in mind, we have a few ideas percolating. Do we want to try to set one to say is like, this is gonna be our kind of Q1 attempt, a project to take on? Based on some of the ideas that have come up, there's housing policy, zoning issues, ULUC, that kind of general category of thought. Sounds a little big, so I'm a little intimidated by taking that one on first, but you know, it could be a great learning opportunity.
What about the way we're investing in development? Is that too broad? Because it's like the way,
What about starting out with the budget?
Could do the budget.
Oh, I need his budget.
I'm such a fan.
Let me look at let me see if I can find the budget calendar. So we do have a budget analyst that we've hired, and you could definitely ask him to come, or anybody from that office to come kind of talk about our budget process. And then Professor Reichart, once in his day, used to teach budgeting. But let me find the budget calendar so we're kind of in the middle of the year, and we're kind of truing up things. So you'll see a bunch of resolutions on the budget, but they're just kind of, well, we underspent there and we overspent here and we need to make it all work together. Let me see if I can figure out the budget calendar and think about when would be when you'd want to target for you. When you want to talking to us. Talk among yourselves and I'll figure this out.
FYI, the budget is 245 pages long. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you want to dive into that.
You wanna use those beautiful early summer months.
It was like, I can't come through.
Another way you could probably think about conceptualizing how you wanna attack these issues is, I like the quarter idea, by the way, just tackling a topic or two or three maybe throughout each quarter. An idea to consider potentially is to maybe create like a subcommittee for each of those 2 or 3 topics that you want to tackle. So maybe you make 1 or 2 people the point person for whatever of the 2 or 3 issues that you wanna tackle per quarter is. So that way you can have people who are diving into those priorities in like a more focused manner, and that can maximize your discussion time and the way you tackle the presentations and those discussions as well. So you probably don't wanna limit yourself to just talking about like one issue, 1 quarter of the year, right? So that's a way to kind of get more and optimize that process as well without taking too much time on one particular issue. Food for thought. I like my advice, but there you go.
I like that a
I
lot.
think also it's like good, because one thing I see a lot in my job is when everyone's in the weeds, it's very hard to like zoom out and look at things in the big picture. And I think by having like 2 or 3 experts, that gives like you, for example, ability to like kind of think about it like on like a more critical lens and outside perspective. So it might be able to help like push in the right direction.
Balancing perspectives. I really like that. I think that's a good way to just be taking on more stuff, not kind of, if we wanna look into housing policy, that presentation falls through and if we all are overwhelmed in the content, then it's just like a month that's wasted or something. It's like we can be juggling a few things in that sense at once. I think that's really good. Yeah. Is budget where we wanna start? Do we want, I mean, and also I guess I don't wanna close the floor down to like other priorities and ideas that come up. Again, I don't think we need to have necessarily everything we're gonna tackle for the year, but I think we should try to leave today with an understanding of like the first 1 to 2 to 3 that we're gonna like be making concrete steps on and can like build an agenda for June around.
Well, considering that the UCLA, so that's the right acronym.
ULUC.
UC. Okay, there we go. All right. Considering that's right around the corner, that's probably the most pertinent issue that's gonna be coming up. I think we can leave budgeting stuff till later in the year. But I think with that meeting, it's probably should be our first thing.
So the ULUC updates that we're gonna do next are mostly around complying with the state's requirements to change our codes around ADUs. And so, and there is a public conversation going on around whether we as a city can tell the state to go jump in a lake and follow their requirements. But there's not a conversation. The conversation isn't about the nuts and bolts about the policy right now. It's either we're gonna comply with the state's expectations or we're not. So it is important, but this one is in many ways a compliance issue versus a policy innovation or new policy kind of. Does that make sense? So you could do it, but the place where you'd want to engage in is either this is stupid, you shouldn't do what the state's asking you to, or this is fine, just move ahead. You know what I'm saying? It's not a, oh, I think you should tweak this or tweak that.
Yeah.
Conversation.
What's happening in June on that? Would we have time to actually like do anything? by
Well,
that point, or isn't it first?
It's coming up relatively quickly. There was a public meeting, I think a week ago, and that was kind of the place to kind of learn about this stuff. Any of you, like, as Mackenzie said, any of you are welcome to send me a note, and I won't read the whole thing sometimes, Mackenzie, but you know that. I'll like say, this is what I've heard from members of the committee, and I'll try to be representative of that. So I guess this is not an issue that's super nuanced. It's just either we comply with the state's expectations or we don't.
What happens if you don't?
Nobody knows. We don't know. I mean, this is kind of a new or relatively, in my mind, maybe I'm wrong. The state hasn't tried to take over or have as much of a voice as it is currently trying to have around zoning and land use. And so they've kind of pushed forward this is one of their new efforts to kind of have more of the state's voice in that. And I think there will be a court case somewhere where a city says, no, we don't have to do what you have to say and sue the state, or the state will sue them.
Cause where does it stop? Like if the city complies with the state, then the homeowners associations within the city or have to comply with the city if they already have their own.
Well,
bylaws
homeowners,
and ordinances.
again, that's the state, because the state it's through state law that homeowners associations this is my understanding, I'm not a lawyer. But the homeowner associations are in some ways, created by the state or allowed through state statute. And so the state has the authority to, just like we are created by the state, the state creates the ability for cities, the state is the primary government, and then it kind of delegates authority to all government organizations. The conversations, because we're a home rule city, we have more authority than other non-home rule cities. That's the conversation.
Yeah, it's not black and white.
Yeah,
Well, also if the state's overstepping.
well, that is, that's exactly the conversation. Is the state overstepping its authority to dictate what's going on in the cities? And I'm sorry, Alex, I'm really just saying, I know that you guys said you want to pick on things that are coming up soon, and I'm saying this is coming up soon, but it's not a particularly meaty topic because we're not being very nuanced.
I think it's meaty.
Okay, well, then great.
It sounds,
Then I'll take it all back.
it's like, all of land use is a lot of stuff. That one specific issue is one specific issue, and it'd be relatively easy for any particular person on this board or public or whatever to go, okay, I understand this issue, here are the things, here's the decision. That was bad, or this is good. It's a fairly cut and dry, well, it's not cut and dry, but it's fairly small and self-contained in that it'd be easy to go, we should have done this, or great job, or bad job, or
We don't agree. I mean, you guys you also may not all agree. We're like, oh, this is an issue that we can't agree.
Well, I do think it's an issue that's had a ton of conflict around it over the past 3 years. It's been on the ballot, voted down, back on the ballot.
Budget.
And so it's definitely not something that everyone's super stoked about. So I think there is more. My personal perspective, looking at what other cities are doing, just brief readings on it. My view is the state is overstepping, so I think there is more to it than that.
If we were to talk though, our next meeting is June 5th. Isn't that up for second reading on June 3rd?
It's coming up very soon.
So I think if we wanted to make this I think we should all weigh in. Should we have personal opinions and look into it, but as a board activity, we might be a little late.
But I think that's everyone should do their independent research, and if you have a strong opinion about it, reach out to council.
I can send you the presentation on it, so you can have that. So this is the budget calendar. So essentially, what happened, the finance department's kind of figuring out how much money we have right about now. And then they start sending numbers to the departments this is standard budget process. Standard numbers, the departments say, this is how much you get to spend next year. And departments get to come back and say, this is what we want. And then any good department manager is like, well, you only gave me $25, but I actually need 30 to do these things. And then they compile it here and get it ready for the council. And then it should come council. Right, so this is September when it starts. That's when the first budget comes to the council. And then we will kind of debate it. and then appropriate the funds. And I think if you go up, I think this is gonna be like October, November, because we're on a yearly calendar, I think. Yeah, so November is when we adopt it. But you can, sorry, Professor Reichart. So we do incremental budgeting. Incremental budgeting means you essentially start with your budget from last year and decide how much you want to add or subtract. We don't do zero-based budgeting, which is, let's look at our whole budget, start over, and rewrite it every year. Because it turns out zero-based budgeting takes a lot of work and it doesn't actually result in much change from what people are doing. And so the fundamental question, and like I've said a couple times, the big action is around capital. So what debt things are we gonna go for? That's where we're gonna spend a lot of money. On the budget for this year, the incremental budget, I think it'll be just kind of, well, we need a couple more FTE here, a few less FTE there. It's not gonna be a big change. And I think
Project Littleton is kind of like a more abbreviated version of this in a way.
Project Littleton,
Well, yeah, because that's where we're gonna be getting all of our debt from, right, as a city for the most part.
oh, you're talking about downtown Littleton?
Project, yes.
No, we're gonna have three different piles of debt. One pile of debt is rebuilding all our storm sewers. And I think I told you this. All of our corrugated steel is washing out and we're gonna spend a lot of money on that. But that debt is all gonna be associated with our storm sewer enterprise fund. And so we'll just get debt and that'll be easy. We also, in the big picture, we're also gonna have, we're also planning for, we also own half of a sewage plant. We own the South Platte Renew, the sewage plant that serves Inglewood and us, and then a bunch of areas to the south of us. They are constantly doing capital improvements. And so there's debt that's there that we're kind of associated with. And then we have to decide, we have some infrastructure that we need to rebuild, particularly the city service center, which is the essentially where our maintenance building. It's down kind of at Windermere and Bellevue. And that building is falling down and is problematic. And so we need to think about what debt do we want to use for that. And then we have to think about what debt do we want to do for Project Downtown? And we have to think about, are there other places that we want to invest money?
Quad Road? Quad Road?
Quad Road is a different, we're not, well, the Quad Road, yeah, we are gonna probably get some debt for the Quad Road, which is a couple $1 million because the costs keep going up. And that would probably be part of the certificates of participation. And we've also been asked to do some investments in Town Hall, the Town Hall Theater. So we own Town Hall Theater, we own the building and Town Hall rents it from us. And so we've tentatively agreed that, you know, they're raising tens of millions of dollars for capital improvements for that space. We've agreed that we would kick in some money possibly around kind of health and safety. So fire alarms and electrical systems.
Dumb question. How much is their rent?
We're not even sure they're paying rent.
Okay.
But that would, again, back to what I said to Michael, that Town Hall Theater was something that, you know, the citizens of the city got together and created 40 years ago to use that space. And it's, you know, and it's kind of a joint activity of the city and then it's kind of nonprofit. It's the same thing at Western Welcome. We have a long history of kind of civic engagement. Hudson Gardens has a similar story of people creating civic institutions. And the city has parts and roles in it, but it's really groups of people who put those things together. And there, if you go down to Carson Nature Center, you can go, they have that little video they show about how that was a product of the 1965 floods. You know, they went to Congress to change the law so that could be, instead of paving the Platte, that was the original plan, was to pave the Platte, they turned it into a floodplain. Like the LA River is paved and we have a floodplain. Oh, and I'm gonna send, what did I say I was gonna send you? So I can send you this budget. But the point is you guys can review the current budget. You could ask for I think you want to try to ask for somebody to come talk to us around these recommendations. You want to have Chris say, we want a budget presentation when the council gets its budget presentation.
It's like a Q3.
Yeah, I think that makes
The
sense.
dates
to-
are-
All set for Q3 kind of, huh?
So, and you guys know, the council is gonna take a break from the middle of June to the middle of July. We're gonna peace out.
Yeah, so that one, I think just from time relevance, that's a very easy one we can hunt to that time, that makes it really relevant. So that takes it off of being our June, July, into August a little bit plan. ULUC specifically probably doesn't like time up quite right on that. That reminded me of the thought, did we have any updates on the what is that institute thing that's happening?
The Urban Land Institute,
ULI, yeah, that's right. Is that happening?
didn't we nominated 2 people?
Yeah, those two right there.
Happening for sure. That's, when is that happening again?
Wednesday,
Okay, well, that's, update on that is definitely gonna be part of the June meeting. Not to impose too much, please push back on this if we disagree. Based on just the housing interest in general, plus that ULI meeting happening, it seems like concrete next things we could do could be just something generally around housing policy and zoning directions, potentially like innovation, renovation funds, things of that nature. Project downtown, even though it's not the peak of the discussion time right now, like we could just get ahead on that. That again is a probably pretty well scoped project, so we could make that one of the new ones. Littleton sub-area plan could, but that's probably not like really concrete enough to do a ton of stuff on. So I'm kind of between one or both of trying to take a stab at some housing stuff, knowing that, you know, we can't do everything all at once, and we could potentially break that into future topics for ourselves, or some project downtown. How do those sound, or other ideas?
Sounds good.
and I think, I think just people kind of doing independent research and deciding what they wanna see, you know, what changes they wanna see. And
But maybe if you're having a presenter, maybe starting with the housing and then project downtown.
I think housing makes sense too, because you were saying something about, I think, grants. And if we're sort of getting our minds around, hey, if this is something we wanted to do, then budget stuff starts happening later in the year. So weigh in on that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think, Chris's point, let's subcommittee, let's think about stuff for June, to be concrete on this. I don't think at this point we need to commit to like what our deliverables are gonna look like. I think that's probably better set once we've had a meeting away to like look into stuff and come back together and then kind of decide like, okay, here's what we've learned about housing in the month. Here's this presentation.
Do we wanna
What do we
present
actually-
for next?
I think we want to present her. I think we'll definitely, you know, we'll have the ULI updates from you guys and just maybe that'll spur some interesting concrete directions. What concretely do we want the presenter on? Do we want that? The grants was more related to like economic development and stuff, right? Or
Well, and I don't, who was it, sorry,
Or the
Robert, who
housing
was the
analyst.
housing person?
So we have a housing analyst, she might be the right person to talk, Julie Latham, but the reason I brought up, I think Jackie or Mackenzie was trying to talk about, you know, if we do grants for economic development, why don't we do grants for housing owners? So you could have economic development, ask one of them to come talk about our grant program. We could have a couple, or just our incentives program in general for what our incentives for businesses.
Who are we talking about tax break incentives? Like if grants aren't in the budget or something, like if tax breaks.
So what I think you're asking about is, so for example, for the mineral place development, which is where the Costco is going. What we did, and we have a policy around this, which is where we've recently developed a policy, which is essentially tax refunds. And so we have an incentive program for that place where we've agreed to give them a sales tax refund of 50% of the sales tax for 10 years or $29 million, whichever comes first. We've also done a similar kind of incentive program for a possible development of a kind of music hall in Littleton Village. And those are kind of the first ones that have been done for a while. So that they're not tax breaks, they're tax refunds. One of the priorities of the council was to not risk any current money. We're really just giving away money, new money. Like instead of getting 100%, we'll only get 50% of that new money. That makes sense?
That might be a better direction to go than grants.
No, but those are all parts of, if you have the economic development team come talk to you, those are all parts of our incentives for businesses. We also have grants for businesses to reimburse them for upgrades to their facilities. And we also, so we have some other ones that I'm not sure I remember. You could ask them about all of those things and see if and think about whether they would apply housing or something else.
So would it make more sense to have the economic?
You could maybe do both. The housing one will be longer because housing's more complex.
What are people's thoughts?
And maybe they're not available, so ask for two and see if you
Yeah, we could always
I
ask.
would ask for both, and if we
Ask for
can do
both.
both, awesome, if not.
I think it's like the intent.
So Chris, if they have questions about what I mean, you've heard it, but if they want to ask me, you know what I'm saying? Because you're gonna have to do that.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah.
But if they have questions, I can.
That's a good idea. I think I can reach out to, I'm sure you'll send me an email with more detail about what you specifically want me to reach out to them about.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that for you. That's a good idea.
Well, I think is that what you're about to follow up on is like, with what intent are we kind of be asking for?
I guess if we're having people come spend potentially like 2 or 3 hours talking to us, like what is the outcome that we're expecting out of that? Like, is it they're gonna talk to us, we're asking questions with the intent that we're gonna walk away with more concrete deliverables? Is the intent that we're just here to like learn and then at a later session we'll come back with what we think, I guess, like kind of thinking about the end in mind, like we're having these people come spend some time out of their day, like what are we gonna get out of it and then how is that kind of piecing together for our future plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there are concrete ideas of like what we want to tell them to tailor, like what they're talking to us on, like that it's helpful. And if people have ideas for that now, like, yeah, definitely let me know and I can pass that along to Chris and that people are part of that process. I think for those two areas, for me personally, my thoughts are like, I like that we're taking this on because I do think it is like one of the more pressing things. It's a little hard to define the exact scope right now. Like I feel like I need to go home for a bit, sift through some stuff, figure out like everything that is happening in Littleton, read through some of these existing plans, policies to come back next time and talk with you all about like, hey, I think we should probably dig into this area. So not to punt the like specific priority setting in like another meeting, but you know, we've narrowed it down to that, at least in an area. Those presentations could potentially help us say, hey, this seems like an area that we want to provide some comment on, whether to staff or council or things like that. So as much as I want a super concrete thing of like, yeah, we're gonna come together and we're gonna talk about these exact problems, I'm okay on an issue as large as like housing analysis to kind of say, we can push that one more month with like some research, and things of that nature. But if there aren't like, that's to say the first part, if there are specific things that we think based on what we know right now, we want to prioritize and have be a focus of that presentation, let's also make sure those are written down and ready to go.
I guess that question, could we? So that's not really bad, it's like homework, but whatever. Kind of say like, okay, maybe like over the next like 2 weeks, we all just kind of like, we kind of have like our umbrella. We kind of like do that research, maybe just write a list of like, hey, here are questions, hey, here are things that I'm seeing that I may not have the full like clarity on, or here's the things I kind of want to press into. Like, we obviously like coordinate and get like the person or persons like to come present and we kind of say like, hey, here's like the collection of things that the group has like asked. That'd be some common themes we can kind of pull together and then just please give that to the presenter. So like, the conversation isn't just, cool, what questions do you have? Or they're giving us a presentation where like actually we brought like this part, not like all the rest of it. I guess it's like to maximize that time, but then also it might help like, I think that always answers that we might just need some more, I need more time personally, but it might come back with like certain themes that like from our individual questions of like, hey, these might be like really small focus areas, and then that also may like yield some of like deliverables.
I like that, like in 2 weeks, everyone that has thoughts about it, send to Bobby or Ricky, I don't know if you wanna be the point person on that, Ricky.
I am, just cause on this one I can pass
Um,
it. This is like an okay process to do, right? For everyone to do their own research for a bit and then before we set the next agenda or like,
Talk about it, well,
well, not talk, but like if everyone were to just email me
individually.
one with like, hey, Bobby, here are my questions that I would like you to compile with everybody else's and pass along to Chris.
And then
Yeah.
you just kind of summarize, 'cause
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of them are gonna overlap.
Exactly,
And then
yeah.
that at least gives the presenters a scope of, okay, we can hit these points for this group.
Yeah, so that's great. So we have to set the agenda by the 29th. So let's tentatively say, to give myself extra time, just in buffer zone, let's say 21st, let's make that. 21st, send me ideas of what we would like to kind of have on the specific agenda and presentation point around housing things based on wherever your research may take you.
You're gonna get mine by next week, cause I'm out of the country for 2 weeks.
I'm out of the country for a while, so
Sorry.
it's gonna be the opposite. I'm not gonna do anything with it until that week, so.
Cool. I was actually gonna say, that's actually the advisable course of action to take, because I still have to reach out to the people and I can't guarantee that they can make the meeting. So the earlier I can get those recommendations sent to them and say, hey, can you guys come present? Or whoever it is that you want me to reach out to, can you come present on the 5th? The sooner I can get that out to them, the better. So just keep that in mind.
Do you wanna move that deadline up to the 16th? Is that enough time for everybody still?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say,
Sorry.
16, no, that's good. You got us
I
to
do
the.
not wanna mess up your vacation. I was gonna say something about it, so there you go. You're just ahead of the schedule.
I think that's great for good starts in that direction. Same goes for economic development. I think if there are targeted questions and things there, we will ask for presentations on both. The more we can tailor those, great. If we have time for both, awesome. We only have time for one, or if one responds, that's great. I'll float to keep Project Downtown from like slipping into the background, that we also spend some time looking into that, knowing we're not gonna have a presentation on it, but I'd like to have an informed discussion about where we think we should go with that, where we think like timelines are, and kind of at least coming together to figure out concrete next steps on that, even if we're not quite at the point to say like, here's what we wanna start working on as a deliverable. Does that feel? Well, that one doesn't have a deadline except for just if stuff comes up in that research that you want on the next agenda specifically, let me know by the agenda deadline. I'm gonna take a second to write all that down so I don't forget it.
Maybe getting a presenter for project downtown Littleton set up for like 2,
For July.
yeah.
That's something we can work on. I was also gonna say, to that point, if you're thinking about how to prioritize the downtown perspective that you guys wanna discuss, the Littleton Downtown Development Authority does owe you a presentation. So they are very willing to come and present, their executive director and I guess someone else who works with her. So keep that in mind, they wanna come talk with you, so.
Maybe we'll put that as a runner-up option if nobody wants to present to us next month. I'd rather have a presentation than not, even if it's not technically on our highest priority thing.
And then is the budget still tapped for Q3?
Yeah, so I think we'll keep a good eye on that, and it sounds like that might be August, September is when that starts like coming back around. So we'll definitely stay ahead of that on like, in terms of, our July meeting, we can talk about where we wanna take that and fit it into whatever else is happening in that moment.
Yeah, I would encourage you to ask Chris to try to start lining people up to talk about that sooner as soon as possible.
The budget.
Yeah. Just to, cause there's kind of yeah.
I do work right across the hall from both of them.
We've got our, see it.
Yeah, terribly hard task for me to accomplish, yeah.
All right, so that gives us good projects for the summer, budget into there, and then we still have a few, Littleton sub-area plan, potentially further housing stuff, potentially charter review things, or transport mobility stuff that we could put as like secondary priorities to fill in either gaps that emerge or later in the year post that budget quarter.
I think it's a good scope for the year,
I think that is.
personally.
I think my only anxieties, and I'm an anxious person, so they're bound to happen, is just like, let's just be mindful of like scope creep of like, right, we could all come back with different views on housing next time and like, we will have to find synthesis about like where we actually want to hit with that. Knowing also that if there's stuff that's exciting to us and that we want to talk about, we can always turn it into a new thing that we hit down the road. Cause I would rather have 3 concrete recommendations on, you know, Project Downtown or specific housing recommendations, Geneva Village, whatever it might be, rather than like a bunch of loose narrative around next gen's ideas about like housing policy.
Agreed.
Turning that into, again, making sure I don't like forget anything. Items for sure on the June agenda, potential presentations, a larger discussion around our own research and thoughts around housing policy, an unknown scale discussion around Project Downtown, and then ULI updates. Anything else for June agenda?
No, that sounds right to me.
I'll float with that agenda building process. I think I only did it a few hours before this meeting, but I think it could just be a good habit for all of us to get into, either in the meeting or just doing it ahead of time and bringing any ideas to it, of like reviewing that tentative council agenda calendar, just over the kind of 2 to 3 months ahead of us, seeing if there's anything that pops up on there, not necessarily as like, we're gonna drop all our initiatives and work on those, but like, we don't have to be bound to just some of these larger, heavier topics with deliverables. If there's stuff we want to discuss and provide smaller updates and stuff too, let's make sure to just like fit those in, try to stay on top of those as a board. The agenda. It's confirming June meeting agenda, well, not confirming, but tentatively setting. Yeah, reminder, the deadline for confirming the June agenda is the 29th. So if stuff comes up in any of the research that you want to be specific discussion topics, just let me know before then. And as a reminder, don't send it to all the board. Just send that to me or Ricky, person of your choosing. I believe that includes our discussion topics, part of the agenda. That was fun. I really liked that. I'm happy I joined this board. Staff updates?
No, I was gonna say, I really liked that discussion too. Other than that, I really don't have any updates for you. It'll be good to reach out to the people that you want me to reach out to and get some stuff going for you. So I'm excited to see what you guys can cook up from a recommendations perspective, and hearing those presentations is usually a good start. So, yeah, other than that, you already know the drill. If you need to reach out to me for anything, you all have my contact. I don't have Michael's contact, so remind me to get it before you go. But yeah, any questions, comments, concerns, reach out to me, and I'm here for it, so.
I got nothing.
I was gonna ask you a question, but I'll wait.
Do it now.
It is, no, it's not.
Okay.
I guess I wanted to say, since we are meeting the ULI people next week, if anyone has anything they want us.
I'm sorry, no, I know, I messed up.
If anyone has any thoughts on that, wanna let us know, send us an email.
Just because it's easier to ask rather than having to go Google it. Remind me of the premise of that meeting, because I already forgot.
So I was actually gonna ask Chris to send a little more detail on exactly what we're going over, but it's the northern entrance into Littleton. So that gate. And
Pull up do Google Maps and show them.
where there was like an old retirement.
It's one block
Right
from
across the
here.
block.
on Fifth Street.
Geneva Village.
Got, okay, so it's, that's what I thought. I didn't remember if there was like a broader
Well, the
policy topic at play or the specific thing, yeah.
policy conversations was going on for a long time, so it was a retirement home for, place for, and, with a very low rent levels in the city, it turns out to be a really crappy, property manager, and we essentially didn't do any good maintenance, and we also didn't verify people's incomes, and we just didn't do a very good job running. And so the council before I was on, agreed that we need to, help everybody that's there move into subsidized housing, and they hired people to help with that. And they generally agreed to, redevelop that land. And that was a big debate within the city, because there was a lot of voices that this is a historical development. That it was designed by an architect who designed a lot of other kind of facilities across the city, including Heritage High School and Arapahoe College. And so we've asked the Urban Land Institute to hold this 3-day kind of meeting to gather public input and provide the council with a vision of what we should do with that space, how we should redevelop it. And I expect that to be the agenda for our conversation. I don't think we will do 100% of what they say, but it'll kind of set the table for what happens with that land.
Yeah, please email us your guys' thoughts and stuff, so we're not just giving our opinions.
We'll do that. That's a good call reminder.
When is that?
It's Wednesday.
Soon.
I keep saying May 6th and it's not the 6th. I have something else the 6th and that's the date in my head. I'll look. I know it's
It's May 7th.
May 7th, thank you.
Close.
I was like, I know.
I guess one thing I didn't, because we all liked the idea. Me and Jeremiah really liked the idea around like the subcommittee points. The way I kind of just left some of that was around, hey, let's all go do a bunch of research vaguely. And these ULI conversations are making me think of like, do we have housing stuff kind of on the burner? We have Project Downtown stuff kind of on the burner. Do people have I would love to just research everything, but like, do people have one of those that they like more than the other? Not that we're gonna prioritize that one, but like, you can be a little mini expert on that area and maybe invest a little bit more of your time into that question.
My recommendation would be to wait until after the presentations to figure that out. But I think, at least last year, when people came in, they talked about different things and certain people were like, oh, you know, depending on where they were, like what neighborhood they were focused on or whatever it might be, there may be more of a pull after a presentation than there is.
That makes sense. So that can be part of kind of the agenda for next time almost, is
Just getting like information.
And then you can.
bringing ideas together, kind of actually breaking out those subcommittees or assignments kind of from there.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Good call. Thanks for the experience that you have listening to these presentations.
I appreciate your organization and keeping us on track.
Thank God Mackenzie didn't get your job. I've been thinking that this entire time. Me too. I've been like, literally, thank God.
Different minds for different roles. It takes all types. I'm struggling to write down words as I'm even listening to this. Okay, I think that's final call for adjourning. Feel good about that?
Okay.
All right. 8:20. Gonna go ahead and adjourn this meeting.